All right, everybody. Welcome to the second episode of my booktube. I still don't know how to do an intro. It's weird. I need to write something out. I don't know how to start these anymore. I had a whole like spiel listed when I did the podcast, but with this whole thing, it's weird because I just keep looking at you and looking at myself, and I really don't know what to say. But today on the channel, I have the lovely Andrea Stewart. Hello, Andrea. How are you?
Hello, I'm good, mostly.
Yeah, for the most part. So yeah, so we're talking a little off air, obviously with things going on and so forth. But I'm just glad we were able to still get a chance to chat and so forth about you and your writing career. Obviously about your upcoming debut from Orbit called The Bone Shard Daughter, which I was super excited about when it was first announced, and I thought it was really neat that you came on and did a panel with me a couple of weeks ago on world building, and now that you're here, and we get to kind of share a little bit more about your debut. So thanks again for being on.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I guess I guess we'll kind of start just kind of at if you want to tell me a little bit about yourself, about growing up, kind of how you got into writing, why you decided to become a writer.
um, oh, that's a lot. Well, I actually started writing at a very young age. So what really inspired me actually was I was in fourth grade, and our teacher had us do these creative writing assignments. And she really loved mine, and she kind of held it up as an example, and I was like, oh wow, so I can actually maybe write stories too instead of just reading them, because I'd always been a very avid reader. So that's kind of what started the whole thing. So I started writing stories from there. My dad had an old computer in his basement, so he set me up with that, which was like, this is gonna age me, but it was like black screen with like green letters, kind of.
Oh man.
So yeah, so it was that, and then I got upgraded to like his newer old computer later, which was like Word Perfect for DOS. So I learned how to do some stuff in there, and that's actually when I wrote my first manuscript, was on that, with the blue screen with like the gray letters. And then I, printed up on your little printer that had like, the holes on the side that
Oh
you had
yeah.
all the paper lined up. Yeah. So that was like, I finished that when I was like in middle school, and I was so proud of it. So I like printed it up and, kind of found it in cardboard and everything. But that's kind of how I started the whole thing. I didn't really start trying to get something published until I was in high school. Uh, and then I started trying to get short stories published. I used to go to the library a lot, like it was like a once a week kind of thing. And I don't know if it's still a thing. It's probably not still a thing, but they had those dragon magazines, where it's called Dragon,
Okay.
and it was like for people that play D&D, which I didn't have enough friends to do that. But they'd always have a short story in there, and I'd always read the short story. So I thought, well, maybe I could just try submitting something there. So I tried a few times, and got 4 rejections. But that didn't stop me. And then I started writing like I tried to write like my first completed book in in college. I mean, I had written that thing that I'd finished in middle school, but it was like, I think 40,000 words. It was like a middle grade kind of thing. So it wasn't really like a full length book. And I
Right.
had like a lot of false starts. So I finished my first manuscript, like epic fantasy, in I think it's right after I graduated college. Yeah. And I was trying to get like an agent for that and get that published. It's been a really long road. So that I did not get an agent for that. I sent out like, I think I have the spreadsheet still somewhere. I sent out like 80 queries. I wrote another book and another book, another one. Yeah, so it took me a while. And the book that I did get my agent with didn't sell. So I wrote another book because that's, I guess, what I've just been accustomed to doing.
It doesn't
And
matter.
then,
Just keep on writing.
exactly. And then that one did not sell either. That's when I wrote this book. So, I mean, that's like been my whole writing journey.
Mhm.
Um, Growing up, like a lot of other fantasy or sci-fi authors, I was a very like nerdy kid, you know, where you're in the corner reading a book and people are like, who is she? She's so weird. She talk. So
I was
that
like
was
that. I didn't even write. So
yeah, that was my experience of growing up being the weird nerdy kid in the corner that was always reading a book and dreaded being called on by the teacher. So yeah, maybe
I can understand that. I was always the kid that sat in the back of the classroom if I could, when we didn't have assigned seating, which took a while because I feel like even when you got in middle school and then maybe early high school, there was enough rowdy kids in the bunch that you've grown up with that you always end up having assigned seats within like the first 2 weeks. So
yeah.
I was always up front and always the one as soon as I look up, teacher's like, "Oh, you need to be called on." Okay.
Which is super fun, yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. Just always have to know the answers, even if you don't. Just be like, yeah, you got me on that one. I didn't study. So, so what was your first? I guess your first manuscript you did in middle school. What was it about?
Oh goodness. Well, so I didn't really know how to relate to people very well back then. So it was a cast of animals. It was like the main character was this horse, and there was the secondary main character was a falcon, and they lived in this magical kingdom of magical animals. And of course, the horse, the main character, is like the only one that doesn't have like any kind of like magical stuff going on. Um, and they get sent on this journey by the king who is dying to go and find a new king because he doesn't have an heir. So that was the premise of my story.
It's pretty impressive. I'm
Of
not gonna lie.
course. I mean, of course, the horse ends up getting magical powers by the end
Of
and
course.
actually ends up being like the king, and that's what the old king intended all along. Because it's not about the actual journey; it's the friends you made along the way.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that was my first manuscript. I was very proud of it by the time I finished. I mean, I'm glad that I did finish it. My grandmother passed away when I was in high school, so I'm like, oh, she actually got to like read something of mine, even if it was not very good.
Mm-mm-mm. So, as far as your books that you've written and you've tried to get agents for and tried to sell and so forth, have you kind of like thought about what you want to do with those? I mean, do you plan on maybe self-pubbing them, or is that just something for down the road, or is that just
Um,
these are my attempts, I'm going to hold on to this and just be like, this is my writing journey?
yeah. So, a couple of them I kind of wrote. Actually, I did self-publish two of them, but they were under like kind of a pen name, and they're very very different from what I usually write. I was just trying to do something a little bit like maybe. I mean, what I was doing wasn't working at the time, so I was like, well, I'll try like at the time urban fantasy was popular, so I'm like, oh, I'll try writing like a urban fantasy character and all that and solving mysteries.
Right.
So I did self-publish those two, and then the epic fantasy ones. One of them I ended up putting up on Wattpad like a while ago because I was like, well, I'm never going to do anything with this. Might as well. And it got featured,
Such a
which I
great
was like,
attitude about it.
okay. Yeah. uh, and then there's the other one too. There's another epic fantasy. Oh, there's no. I'm sorry. There's three epic fantasies that not make it through the gauntlet.
You're just trying to repress those. That's fine.
A lot. Yeah, it was a lot. But yeah, so one of them I put on Wattpad. The other two I don't think are gonna see the light of day. It's one of those things where you go back and you read it and you're like, I could do better now. So I'll probably just cannibalize some of the parts of it for newer stories, like the parts that I did like. Yeah. But yeah,
what's the one that you have up on Wattpad?
Oh, it's called Songweaver's Awakening. It's like it's like set in this desert country, and the main character is this boy who finds out that he can like influence people and their thoughts through his music, but this is like a forbidden magic that he's not even aware is forbidden. So then people start trying to kill him, and there's like the Fae folk in it as well, and it's it's a lot. It's like multi POV kind of a lot of stuff going on.
I'm just bringing it all back.
I mean, I'm fond of it in some ways. I liked the setting because, so much of what we read in fantasy is very like Western, European, medieval. So it was away from that kind of aesthetic, but the writing I thought is like, I went back and read some of it. I'm like, well, I'll just put it up and like not look at it again. So
it's out there now. I can't do anything about it.
It is. And people read it and they seem to like it, which I was like, oh, okay. And then I got like messages from people, oh, when are you going to put up the second one? And I'm like,
kind of have it written.
Yeah, that one's not going to happen. The second Bone Shard book is happening, but not
there you
that
go.
one. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So who'd you say I guess were some of your early influences in writing, and then maybe who are some that you have now or continue to have?
So I did a lot of
Losing you a little bit.
I'm sorry. Oh, can you hear me?
You're fine. Yeah,
Oh,
I can hear you now. Yeah. I think it was just cutting in and out.
Oh, okay. So, it's like the usual kind of suspects for when you're younger, like what you get into is like Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe for fantasy. Lloyd Alexander's Pride and Chronicles. I still love those books. They're amazing. There's a giant cat. I mean, who wouldn't love it? And then I started reading some of the stuff that my dad had just like on a shelf in the basement, like I, Robot from Piers Anthony, like Dune. As I got older, I think the first like big epic fantasy that I read was like Robert Jordan, Eye of the World. So I got really into that for a little while. But when I was younger, I think like Watership Down, I read like a gazillion times. I love that book. Last Unicorn by Peter S. Beagle is also incredible. It's one of those books that you read as a kid that you think is wonderful, and then you read later as an adult and you still think it's wonderful, but you're picking up like different nuances and different things about the book. So I think that's one of those books that is timeless in that way. So Wheel of Time was what got me started into the whole like, I like epic fantasy, it's amazing. And then then I hit all your usual suspects. Like I read some Raymond Feist. I've read a little like George R. R. Martin later on. Who else? Brandon Sanderson, definitely. Yeah, and then I started to branch out a little more because like that's those are kind of like your usual suspects. It's like you go and you ask people like, if I want to read epic fantasy, what should I read? And they always suggest the same things, which You
You
know,
mean like Reddit fantasy?
yeah, they're like, oh, like, Mistborn, Wheel of Time,
Malazan.
Marathon, which I actually have not. I have not read that
Haven't
yet.
either. Haven't either. I have the whole series and I haven't touched it.
Yeah, I hear they're quite like dense.
You can actually
So,
buy the I think the like an entire omnibus and a Kindle edition. It's like $70. And I can't
mhm.
even remember how many. I think it's like 11,000 pages or something like that. I
Oh
can't
my
remember exactly
goodness,
how big it is.
that
I
is a
know
lot.
it just
Yeah,
it just sounds like an insurmountable mountain. Like I just don't even want to touch it.
I think it was funny because when I started reading Way of Kings, I actually got it on Kindle first. So I had no idea how long it was, and I'd been reading, and I was reading, and I looked at like the progress bar, and it was like 2%. It's like, what? Oh, this is a long book. I just picked it up because I was a fan of Brandon Sanderson.
Right.
Yeah, so just like don't really. I mean, that's one, I guess, like a benefit sometimes of reading something on a Kindle, so you don't really realize exactly how long it is, and so it's less intimidating.
Yeah, but it's a little bit of a surprise when you've been reading for an hour and you get nowhere and you felt like you've just like climbed Everest.
Yeah, yeah, it's pretty
Been there,
crazy.
done that.
Yeah. Oh, Melanie Ron was a big one too. I really loved her books. I mean, I still have
You
like,
you did read a lot.
oh gosh, I mean, I could go on like Octavia Butler, like that. Have read everything of hers, and she is absolutely incredible. I was very sad that I did not discover her work until after she had passed away, because I would have loved to, I don't know, seen her from a distance and like just been like, oh. And then more recently, like N.K. Jemisin is amazing. Like, if anyone out there has not yet read Broken Earth trilogy, it is wow. It's the kind of thing that you read and you're like, well, I'll never be that good. So,
Well, I'm done.
yeah, basically. Yeah, so those are like a lot of authors that I read and kind of really influenced me. Yeah, there's more. There's more. I can't think of it off the top
I'm
of my
not gonna
head.
lie. You've given more than I'm pretty sure any other author I've spoken to, because everybody says they read a lot growing up, but they typically read the same author. So
Oh, really?
yeah, and like most of the influence was like King, and that's like it. Like,
Really? Just
that's it.
Stephen
That's
King?
all you read.
No, that's so funny because I actually have not read Stephen King yet. I've
At
read
all.
like, no, well, okay, so I started to
Okay.
read. I was flipping through like The Shining, I think once because, but it wasn't mine. I think it was my brother's or something. But so I couldn't take it with me. That's as far as I got. But I've heard wonderful things, and it's TBR list, right?
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. There's always a story for every individual. I mean, they're all different. I mean, you've got your fantasy, you've got your horror, you've got science fiction. I mean, you just kind of have to grab something. If it grabs you, good. If it doesn't, there's a lot of the library left. So.
There is.
Oh goodness, yeah. That's like the other day. You were talking about reading Sanderson. I've got a author. He's got his magnum opus is basically what we're calling it, coming out next year. It's his kind of coming of age, kind of like a boy's life or it, kind of story. And he was like, "Oh yeah, it's really long. It's almost 200,000 words." And I go, that is pretty long. Whatever. I've read books that are that big, and then I got I got the e-arc to put it on my Kindle, and I look at it like the location you're at in the book, and when it said 11,000, that's when it really hit me that it was going to take a while to read it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you look at something like, George R. R. Martin's books, and I think those are over 200,000 words. They're quite
Yeah,
hefty.
yeah. I think I
Yeah.
think I think I think even the first one's like 11 or 1,200 pages.
Yes.
And I think they just continue to get bigger. So
Yeah, it's funny because like when people talk about like, oh, well, why isn't his next book out and everything? I'm like, like he's writing like 4 to 5 books like, with the length of those things.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, and it's not like he's not releasing anything. I mean, he's at least got 1 or 2 books every year coming out. It's just that's not the one everybody is looking for. And then he gives something else. He's like, oh, this is pretty good. It'll tide me over for a month, and then I'm back on the forums complaining. So
Well, I'm always going to feel sympathetic. So
right, yeah. I feel like authors have all the sympathy and readers don't. I think that's the problem.
yeah, well, I understand it is hard to wait as a reader for the next book to come out, especially, if you really want to know what's happening with the characters and you care about them. I mean, on the other hand, it is kind of like the mark of a good author that you care that much and you do want to read the next one. So
Exactly. Yeah, and people are probably looking at it as like, gosh, he's been writing these for so many years, and he's got to be done with it by now. I mean, da da da. I'm just like, he's trying to perfect it, make sure it's great, because, and probably also he's trying to let like the end of the show like kind of get brushed under the rug again, so everybody kind of forgets about that ending and be like, okay, now I have the good stuff, So. Which I thought the ending was okay, but it is what it is.
it is what it is.
It's over now. I can't change it.
Yeah.
So to me, a little bit about your writing process. Obviously, since you've been writing for a while now, since middle school, which a lot of authors honestly haven't even told me that. Usually, they didn't start till a little bit later. But kind of how has it changed since that first manuscript? Besides, how your computer has changed and
changed.
how technology has changed. I mean, do you and would you consider yourself more of a plotter, or do you consider yourself a pantser now?
Oh, I'm definitely a plotter. So when I started out writing, I didn't even know what it meant to be a plotter. I just thought, I read a bunch of stuff, and they didn't have the internet back then, so you're not going to be looking up like how to write a book. So back then I just tried to pants everything, which is probably why I didn't finish a book for a while. Past that, like first middle school manuscript, I had a lot of starts and stops. So it wasn't until I started writing that book in college that I realized like I need to have a plan, and I need to know where this is going to go, and I need to know where this ends, because otherwise I'm not going to know how to finish it. So I definitely sit down and plot things now. Usually what happens is I'll have an idea for a book, and I'll start like jotting some things down. And then I'll start writing like maybe like a chapter or two, just to get the feel for what the world is like and what the voices are like and what the characters are like. And then once I kind of feel like I have that, and I've done like some background, like jotting down of, oh, this is what the world is like, and these are the characters and everything, then I'll sit down and actually do a chapter by chapter outline. So for multi-POV stuff, I usually split it by POV. So I'll do, if I know like these are the POVs that are happening, then I'll do each POV like one at a time kind of thing, where I'll go through and plan out their chapters as far as what their whole arc is going to look like from beginning to end. And I'll do that for each of the POVs, and then I'll go and like move them around so that it makes more sense like chronologically, and with like everything that's happening in the other chapters, and then make any kind of refinements from there, and then I start writing it. So that's kind of my process now. I found it to be one of those things where it's constantly adjusting, just depending on the book and depending on how solid I am on the details. I always think that, oh, I have it down, and then the next thing I know, I'm spiraling like, what was I thinking about this plot point? This doesn't make any sense. And I have to go and like fix something or do something out of order. So yeah, so that's kind of, I would say, my basic process for writing a book.
I gotcha. So do you Do you have like a lot of like, like Fields Notes journals that you write all this stuff down? Do you
Yeah.
use I guess writing software like Scrivener, or do you have like a
Yeah.
whiteboard that you just got a bunch of
Oh
crazy
gosh,
writing down?
no, I'm disorganized as it is, so that would be a disaster. No, I do use Scrivener, which has been really helpful. I was one of those people that I resisted using Scrivener for the longest time because I was like, oh, I heard there's a bit of a learning curve, and I didn't want to have to like invest the time to try to figure it out. But it actually is fairly intuitive. I watched like a couple of YouTube videos about how to use it, and I found it to be really helpful in organizing my thoughts and organizing what's going on with the world. I have found that the more complicated that things get with the world and the further along I get in this trilogy, I did start a wiki, which I've found to actually be a lot of help in organizing things. Because the thing is, with Scrivener, it's really nice to be able to have your documents where you're like characters, history, economy, and have your notes written down in there. I know some people use things like journals where they write things down by hand. For me, though, I find that difficult to go back and actually find the information that I'm looking for. Even in Scrivener, where I have things labeled, sometimes like there are things that are they're kind of like they should fit under maybe one or two of those topics. So I have difficulty remembering which one it's actually in. So with the wiki, I found that it's very helpful using that stuff, and then you can link to each of those different articles from your one article. So if you have like, so if I had like the one about like the empire, and then I have like stuff about the islands, then I have a link there to this is my document about the islands, and under that one there's documents about each of the individual islands, like things like that. So I've definitely found that useful to go back and try to remember what exactly I had named things, or what process people were using in the story to do whatever. It's just, I think when you're trying to create a whole world and you're trying to make it feel real, it's a huge undertaking to remember everything that's going on in it.
Oh,
It's
yeah,
impossible.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when you're not just writing one book. I mean, when you're trying to span it, to a third book, and depending on, when it was you finished book one and now you're on book three, and you're like, crap, I have to remember what happened and who is still there and what did they do last. And now, as far as the wiki goes, I mean, that's something that's, I guess, open to the public, right? Like people
Oh
could
no, it's just
see
me.
that. Oh, it's just you.
Yeah,
What would that be, something that you would post that people can kind of reference stuff at
I don't
some
know,
point?
maybe someday when all three books are done, because obviously it's very heavy right now, because
Mhm.
yeah, there's a lot of like world secrets and things that you don't
Mm.
really find out till second or third book. So yeah, and then I'd probably have to go and like label things as spoilers. I don't know. It just depends on what I'm doing at the time, I suppose. I mean, I'm
I
one of those
gotcha.
people that I think like, oh, that was a really cool thing to do, and I should do that. And then I realize that there's like only 24 hours in a day, and you're sleeping for 8 of those.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, yeah, and it's only going to become more challenging with a little one on the way, and all that stuff. So I
yeah,
can't imagine.
that's gonna be fun. It'll be a challenge, but I like making my life complicated, apparently. So
My wife says the same thing about me because I take this full time job on. I've got kind of a side job as a real estate agent, which I haven't been doing a whole lot, obviously, since COVID happened. And then you've got book review blog, and then I was like, I'm going to start a podcast, and I did that, and then I did the con, and now I'm just deciding to do booktube. I'm like, what else can I spread myself thin with? I was like, oh yeah, let's have a baby. So yeah, it's crazy.
it'll be rough for a
Yeah.
little while, I'm sure. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, especially as you're you and your baby are kind of filling each other out. You're like, all right, are we going to get some sleep? Are we not? Are we actually going to have a schedule? Yeah, we're excited about it and we're anxious about it, but at the same time, we're like, Ooh, it's a lot.
Yeah, and you can't really predict it either. I think some
No.
babies tend to be easier and some are harder. So
Yeah, because you get all the like the horror stories on one side, you get, oh, my baby was great on the other side. You kind of see how your friends raise their kids because we've got several like friend groups where a lot of them have kids like under 5 and even younger, and we're like, all right, so we're not going to do that. We might try that. We'll see. It's nice. It's kind of like trial runs. You can see how other people do their stuff and be like, all right, let's go take some notes. Now, I will say you've got some competition at your house though, because I've been seeing the video posts and stuff about your cats wanting to play with all the new stuff. So
oh yeah.
your child's gonna have some competition.
Oh goodness. Yeah, that's gonna be fun. So basically when my previous cat passed away, he was 16, and my husband and I, well, let's get another kitten. And then we decided that we should get 2 kittens, and then we each picked one. So he wanted a Maine Coon, so we got a Maine Coon, and they're very laid back. Like half the time, I don't even know where she is,
Yeah.
because she's sleeping somewhere, and she's just very relaxed. And then I wanted a Savannah, which they're kind of extra. So yeah, I had to run him around before I got on this live stream because I wanted to make sure he was going to sleep. Because he's like, as my husband describes, like a puppy toddler, like monkey thing. Yeah, so he gets into everything, and he's very energetic, and he needs a lot of attention. So it's going to be interesting, I think. He's very, very good with small kids, but he's never seen a baby before.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where I think like it's going to be hell for like the first year or so, maybe. And then when the kid becomes a bit more interactive, then it's going to be a lot more fun. Like they'll keep each other occupied. That's kind of like my hope. My husband
Right.
says I'm like the lady that swallowed a spider to eat the fly, but we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, it's like
Knock on wood.
yeah, exactly. We read some stuff about like getting your pets kind of used to like scents and so forth. And some of us the other day, we've got almost a 2-year-old corgi that we adopted last year, and we're like, all right, well, she's gonna be the one that's kind of out for the majority of the time, and she's very petite, so we're like, oh, she'll be all right with it. So we decided to try with like a stuffed bear, and we grabbed a diaper just so she could get the scent and stuff. Well, the thing is, she was smelling the diaper and she was very curious. And then she started to kind of like lick the diaper a little bit and then try to bite it. And so we kind of be like, no, don't do that. Well, the next thing you know, we say no on that. And then she goes and bites the leg on the bear. And I go, oh, this is not a good precursor, kind of thing. But I kept telling her, I was like, look, I was like, Rachel, it's a toy. She thinks it's for her, so I don't think she's gonna bite the baby. But I was like, but if we put her in the swing, she'll never go near her, so don't have to worry about it. So, but yeah, it's interesting. I'm interested to see how it's gonna be because like I said, you hear all those contradicting stories about how they, other people raise their kids and stuff. I'm like, we're just gonna have to learn as we go. We're already not getting a whole ton of sleep, so we're kind of used to that by now, and we're used to keeping ourselves busy. So
yeah, I mean, I see other authors have kids, so I'm like, okay, well, it's been done before. So
it's not like you're breaking new ground.
right. I always have to remember that. If somebody else did it, I could do it too, I'm sure.
Exactly. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about your upcoming debut from Orbit called The Bone Shard Daughter, which is the first book in the Drowning Empire. So first off, how excited were you when you saw the cover? Because it's flat out gorgeous.
Well, first they sent me a sketch, and even the sketch I was just blown away by. It's incredible. They sent me also like a couple of the reference photos that the artist was using, and some of it was like some Chinese carvings and ivory, and it really reminds me a lot of this chest that my parents have in their room. That it's got all of those kinds of carvings on it, and I used to play with it when I was a kid. So it's got like, the buildings and then the landscape with the trees and everything, and it's like, oh man, it's just like somebody was reading my mind or something. So yeah, I mean, seeing the cover was incredible. It's always a moment that I think makes it feel a lot more real.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still like not quite, but I think it's happening. It's happening. So yeah.
But I said it'll probably feel real once you actually, because you haven't gotten any author copies in yet, have you?
I just did actually.
Oh, did you really?
So yeah, so that's like the advanced reading copy. So it's like this one's paperback, but
it's physical.
I know I can touch it. It's got like my picture in it.
Is that weird?
Words I wrote. It is very strange. It's very strange, especially since it's something that I have been, dreaming about since I was a kid, and it took a lot longer than I thought it would. It was a lot more difficult than I thought it would be, but I made it.
I know. Now it's like a sense of relief, right? You're just like, oh, it's happening.
Well, I mean, I always knew because I'd gone and read, other authors' accounts of getting their first deal and what happened from there and everything. I always knew that it was going to be one of those things where it's great, but the work doesn't stop there, right? You're always like climbing another mountain. So you get to the top of the one mountain and then you look and there's like another mountain there. So it's a little bit of a relief. So you can like, sit for a second and be like, wow, what an amazing view. And then you gotta start going up the next one.
It's like that last day on vacation where the weather's perfect and you're just looking at it and you're like, now I gotta go home.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I'm gonna start all over again.
Right. You don't get to stop writing books, right? Not that you'd want to, but yeah.
You can't just one and done and be like, all right, one hit wonder, I'm good.
Right. And especially,
I mean, I guess you could. Yeah. Well, yeah. I'd like to just combine them all into one.
There's two more books of story to finish. So yeah, I think that was one of the things I started thinking about pretty quickly. I mean, especially when you do go out on submission, usually publishers will want to know if you're trying to sell this as a trilogy, what are you going to do with the next two books? So pretty much immediately I was like writing up little like synopses of this is like what's going to happen and what the characters are going to deal with. So yeah, but this whole process has been incredible. It is definitely like beyond my wildest dreams, really.
Yeah, and you've got a pretty great publisher. I mean, Orbit's been kind of, I feel like one of the absolute leaders in fantasy and science fiction for the past couple of years, and they, from what I can tell, I mean, they love their authors, they love the books they push out, and I mean, they're always kind of, I feel like, a step above as far as promoting and so forth. So I mean, kind of couldn't. I mean, you can maybe say that you could have landed somewhere better, but I mean, honestly, I think you landed in a perfect spot.
I was very happy with Orbit. Yeah, I had the good fortune to get more than one offer, and I was very, very, very happy to land with Orbit. Like, I feel like when you're young, you kind of look at professions and businesses, and you're like, oh, someday I'll be like that. I'll have it all together. And then you get older and you realize like nobody's actually really got it together. But Orbit is one of those few places, I think, that they actually have it all together. Like they are really on top of things. So I'm very happy.
Absolutely. So can you tell us a little bit about what we can expect in the Bone Shard Daughter, since we still have a few months for at least us peons to be able to read it?
Okay. So I did not prep a whole like summary. Okay. Well, it's set in an empire of like many islands, and the emperor's rule is failing. He keeps control over the islands using these monstrous constructs, and these constructs are powered basically by shards of bone that he collects from his citizens, and that actually drains their life a little bit. So basically his rule is failing. A revolution is starting. There's a couple of main characters that we follow through the book. There's Lynn, who is his daughter, and he's basically refusing to name her as his heir because she has these gaps in her memory. And then there's another main character, because there's more main characters, but another one is Jovis, who is a smuggler, and he kind of gets caught up with this revolution that is happening at the same time, this rebellion. So that kind of describes a little bit about. I have to get better at this.
No, you're fine. You're completely fine. I put you on the spot, but I feel like I did that during Mayday Con too.
It's not really like putting me on the spot because I should have this down by now. I should. Yeah.
Look, we'll blame it on the coronavirus. It's fine.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's very distracting.
So as far as your debut, do you have any maybe authors or books maybe here recently in the fantasy realm that you would not really like direct compare it to, but like, if you like so and so, you may like my works. I mean, I know obviously Alex Harrow did a blurb for it, which she wrote 10,000 Doors January, and has got her newest one coming out later this year from Red Hook. So just thoughts.
Well, okay, so I'm gonna like basically kind of defer to Orbit here because they made some comparisons. So I'm like, yeah, that sounds great. So they made comparisons to R.F. Kuang's Poppy War, and also Brandon Sanderson and S.H. Chakraborty. I don't know how to pronounce her last name.
I think that's right.
I don't know.
It's close enough.
City of Brass, I think it is.
Yeah.
So yeah. So those are the comparisons that they had.
Pretty good comparisons.
Yeah, it's like, I'm very pleased with those. So.
Yeah. So I know we had talked a little bit before we came on to chat, but we had talked about if you wanted to do a reading, and you said that you wanted to read a little bit from chapter 2. Is that right?
Yeah. So I know that chapter 1 is basically online and available for people to read on IO9. So I thought maybe I could read a little bit of chapter 2. So
absolutely. So take a second. If just let me know when you're ready, and it's all yours.
Okay. So I'm gonna read from this one that I just received because it's real now. So just to preface, this is Jovis's point of view, and this is first person, and he is a man, and I am not. So just pretend for a second, because I know they say don't read first person from the different gender of yourself because it's confusing to people. So this is a man. Okay, Jovis, Deerhead Island. I hoped this was one of my smaller mistakes. I tugged at the hem of the jacket. The sleeves were too short, the waist too roomy, the shoulders just a bit too broad. I sniffed the collar. The musky star anise perfume went straight up my nose, making me cough. If you're trying to attract a partner with that, best try a little less, I said. It was a good piece of advice, but the soldier at my feet didn't respond. Is it still talking to oneself if the other person is unconscious? Well, the uniform fit enough, and enough is what I could hope for most days. I had 2 full standard boxes of Whetstone on my boat. Enough to pay my debts, enough to eat well for 3 months, enough to get my boat from one end of the Phoenix Empire to the other. But enough would never get me what I truly needed. I'd heard a rumor at the docks, a whisper of a disappearance similar to my Amala's, and I'd be cursing myself the rest of my life if I didn't suffer. I slipped from the alleyway, resisting the urge to tug at the jacket hem once more. Nodded to another soldier when I passed her in the street, let out my breath when she nodded back, and turned away. I'd not checked the yearly tithing festival schedule before stopping, and because luck rarely worked out in my favor, this meant, of course, the festival was here. Deerhead Island was swarming with the Emperor's soldiers, and here I was, a traitor without an imperial contract who'd had more than one run-in with Empire's soldiers. I held the edge of my sleeve in my fingers as I navigated the streets. I'd gotten the rabbit tattoo when I'd passed the navigational exams. It was less pride and more practicality. How else would they identify my swollen and bloated body if I washed ashore? But now, as a smuggler, the tattoo was a liability. That and my face. They'd gotten the jawline wrong on the posters. The eyes were too close together, and I'd cut my curling hair short since then. But I was a likeness. I'd been paying gutter orphans to take them down, but then 5 days later, I'd see some damned construct putting another one back up. It was a shame that Imperial uniforms didn't come with hats. I should have taken my whetstone and fled, but Amala was a string in my heart that fate couldn't seem to stop tugging. So I set my feet one in front of the other and did my best to appear as bland and blank as possible. The man at the docks had said the disappearance was recent, so the trail was still fresh. I didn't have much time. The soldier hadn't seen me before I clobbered him, but he'd patched a section of the left elbow, and he'd recognized. The street narrowed ahead, sunlight filtering down through gaps between the buildings, and laundry hung to dry. Someone inside called out, "Don't keep me waiting. How long does it take to put on a pair of shoes?" I wasn't far from the ocean, so the air still smelled like seaweed, mingled with cooking meat and hot oil. They'd be preparing their children for the festival and preparing the festival meal for when their children returned. Good food couldn't heal wounds of body and soul, but it could soothe them. My mother had prepared a feast for my tray panning day. Roasted duck with crisp skin, grilled vegetables, fragrant and spiced rice, fish with the sauce still bubbling. I'd had to dry my tears before eating it. But that was a time long past for me. The scar behind my right ear long since healed. I ducked beneath a shirt hung too low and still damp, and found the drinking hall the man at the docks had described. The door creaked as I opened it, scraping a well-worn path along the wooden floorboards. This early in the morning, it should have been empty. Instead, Imperial guards lurked in dusty corners, dried fish hanging from the ceiling. I made my way to the back, my shoulder against the wall, my wrist hidden by my thigh, my head down. If I had been a better planner, I'd have wrapped the tattoo. Oh well. My face was the bigger problem, and I couldn't wrap that. A woman stood behind the counter, her broad back to me, hair tied up in a handkerchief with a few loose strands stuck to her neck. She hunched over a wooden cutting board, her fingers nimbly pleating dumplings. "Auntie," I said to her, deferential. She didn't turn around. "Don't call me that," she said. "I'm not old enough to be anyone's auntie except to children." She wiped her floured hands on her apron, sighed. "What can I get for you?" "I wanted to talk," I said. She turned around then and gave my uniform a long look. I don't think she even glanced at my face. "I sent my nephew along to the square already. The census takers would have marked him by now. Is that what you're for?" "You're Danila, right?" "I have questions about your foster daughter," I said. Her face closed up. "I've reported everything I know." I knew the reception she'd received upon her report because Amala's parents had gotten the same. The shrugged shoulders, the annoyed expressions. Young women ran away sometimes, didn't they? And besides, what did they expect the Emperor to do about it? "Just leave me in peace," she said before turning back to her dumplings. That soldier in the alleyway might be waking up right now with a splitting headache and a good many questions on his lips. But Amala. Her name chased itself around my head, spurring me to action. I slid around the end of the counter and joined Danila at the cutting board. Without waiting for any sort of approval, I picked up the wrappings and the filling and began to pleat. After a startled moment, she began again. Behind us, two soldiers bet on their game of cards. "You're good," she begrudged me. "Very neat, very quick." My mother, is, a cook. I shook my head with a rueful smile. It had been so long since I'd been home. Another life, almost. Makes the best dumplings in all the Isles. I ran about a lot, sailing and studying for the navigational exams, but I always liked to help her, even after I passed. "If you passed the navigational exams, why are you a soldier?" I weighed my options. Good liar. The best. It was the only reason I still had a head on my shoulders. But this woman reminded me of my mother, gruff but kind-hearted, and I had a missing wife to find. I'm not. I slid my sleeve up enough to show the rabbit tattoo. Daniela looked at the tattoo and then at my face. Her eyes narrowed, then widened. Jovis, she said in a whisper, you're that smuggler. I'd prefer most successful smuggler in the last 100 years, but I'll settle for that smuggler. She snorted. Depends on how you define success. Your mother wouldn't think so, I'd guess. You're probably right, I said lightly. It would deeply pain her to know how far I'd fallen. Danila relaxed, her shoulder now touching mine, her expression softer. She wouldn't give me away. Just wasn't the sort. I need to ask about your foster daughter, how she disappeared. There isn't much to tell, she said. She was here one day and then gone the next, 19 silver coins left on her bedspread, as though a silver phoenix was all a year of her life was worth. It was 2 days ago. I keep thinking she'll walk back in the door. She wouldn't. I knew because I'd thought the same for a year. I could still see the 19 silver coins scattered across Amala's bed, could still feel my heart pounding, my stomach twisting, caught in that moment of both knowing she was gone and not being able to believe it. So she was a bright young woman, Danila said, a quaver in her voice. She struck the tears from her eyes before they could reach her cheeks. Her mother died in a mining accident, and she didn't know her father. I never married, never had any children of my own. I took her in. I needed someone to help. Was. The word thudded from my mouth. I couldn't form the question. Danila picked up another wrap and studied my face. I may not be old enough to be your auntie, but to me, you are still a boy. If the Empire had anything to do with her disappearance, she's already dead. I have never been in love. We never met as children. We never became friends. I never took the chance, never kissed her. I never came back from Imperial Island. I told myself the lie over and over. Even so, my mind layered on top her teasing smile, how she rolled her eyes when I made up a particularly silly story, the way she leaned her head onto my shoulder and sighed. But I needed to believe the lie, because every time I thought about living the rest of my life without her, panic fluttered up my chest and wrapped itself around my throat. I swallowed. Did you look for her? Did you find any? Of course I looked, she said. I asked around. One of the fishermen said they saw a boat leave early that morning, not from the docks, but from a nearby cove. It was small, dark, and had blue sails. It went east. That's all I know. It was the boat I'd seen the morning Amala had disappeared, rounding the edge of the island, the mist so thick I wasn't sure I'd seen it at all. In 4 years, this was the best lead I had. If I was quick, I might be able to catch it. One of the soldiers in the hall laughed, another groaned, and cards hit the table. Chairs scraped against the floor as they rose. It was a good game. A beam of sunlight warmed the back of my neck as they opened the door. Hey, you coming with us? The captain will bite your head off if you're late. No one answered, and I remembered the soldier's jacket I wore. He was talking to me. Danila seized my wrist, the one with the tattoo. Both her voice and her grip were intractable as tree roots. I've done you a favor, Jovis. Now I need a favor of you. Oh, no. Favors? We didn't speak of favors. She talked over me, and I heard footsteps approaching from behind. I have a nephew. He lives on a small isle just east of here. If I have it right, you'll be headed in that direction anyways. Take him before the ritual. Get him back to his parents. He's their only child. I'm not one of the shardless few. I don't smuggle children, I hissed. It's not ethical or profitable. I tried her grip and found her strength greater than mine. Do it. By the sound of the footsteps behind me, there was only one soldier. I could handle him. I could lie my way out of this. But after all these years, I still remembered the trickle of blood from my scalp running down my neck, the cold touch of the chisel against my skin. The wound felt like fire. The emperor says that the tithing festival is a small price to pay for the safety of us all. It didn't feel like so small a price when it was your head bowed and your knees digging into the ground. I am hardened to the suffering of others. Another lie I told myself because I couldn't save everyone. I hadn't been able to even save my own brother. If I thought too much on all the suffering, all the people I couldn't help, I felt like I was drowning in the endless sea itself. I couldn't carry that weight. Mostly this worked, but not today. Today I thought of my mother, her hands on each side of my face. But what is the truth, Jovis? The truth was that someone had saved me. Sometimes one is enough. I'll take him, I said. I was a fool. So.
Yeah, very nice.
So that's Daniel's chapter 2.
And like you said, yeah, IO9's got chapter 1. If you guys want to go search it out, but Bone Shard Daughter comes out on Kindle, hardcover, and audiobook on September 8th. Correct?
Yes,
Or
in
is
the
it September
US,
3rd?
US,
Yes.
Canada, I know it's September 8th. UK is September 10th.
Okay. Well, hey, 2 days. They'll be all
I
right,
know.
right? Yeah, I guess all UK releases are on Thursdays, or at least I feel it's that way.
Oh, is it? I don't
I
have
think
much
so.
experience with this, so.
Well, I've noticed like Gallant's releases are on Thursdays because like Jeremy Zoll's release is hitting Thursday instead of
Oh, that's right.
Tuesday.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so yeah,
I'm
that
excited for his
maybe
book.
that's the thing. I know, yeah, it's gonna be great. So, but I just want to thank you for coming on. It's been a pleasure
Oh,
talking to you.
thank you
I
so much
really
for having me on.
Absolutely. I really enjoyed talking to you during Mayday Con. I kind of wanted to do one-on-one, so I've had all those other people on here. So
Yeah, yeah. I love that you're doing that. It's really great, especially
yeah,
like
absolutely.
nowadays when we can't, get together at a con or anything. So
Yeah, and who knows if we'll be able to again,
I
unfortunately.
know. I know.
But yeah, I know, yeah, just cross his fingers for sure. But just thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on, and I know I'm sure I can speak for everybody. We're all looking forward to your debut, and we can't be more excited and happy for you about this opportunity you've got. And yeah, hopefully, some of us could get some early reviews out for you, so we can get you some more books sold.
That would be
And
amazing. And I'm very
absolutely.
excited for the release of this. So
Well,
except for
awesome.
the fact
Well,
that, I have to finish my second book. So
right, yeah, and the things that come with the first book being published.
yes.
just don't pull a Nick Martell where you wait till like the last day to get your
Oh,
edits.
oh no. My rough draft is actually finished already for second book. I just need to do revisions and then hand it in. So
Fantastic. Well, awesome. Well, just thanks again, and maybe we'll try to do this again for book 2 if we're not able to do in-person stuff by that
I would
point.
love that.
Fantastic. Well, you enjoy the rest of your week, and we'll talk again soon.
Okay, sounds good.
Thanks, Andrea.
Thank you.